The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It was a vast, hollowed-out structure suspended in space, with transparent walls that showed the stars beyond. A quiet hum filled the air as dozens of representatives from different species, some humanoid, some incomprehensible in form, took their seats. The floor, made of a shimmering metallic substance, stretched for miles in every direction. Floating platforms hovered, holding the council members in place. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Carter Reyes. He adjusted the collar of his dark uniform, his expression calm, his posture unwavering. It was his first time on this stage, the highest political arena in the galaxy, and yet he didn't feel out of place. Humanity had fought for this moment. They had earned their seat at the table, and they would hold it. He glanced at the faces around him, alien eyes filled with suspicion, curiosity, and in some cases, quiet fear. Humanity had made quite the impression across the galaxy, and not all of it had been positive. While many had been amazed at their technological advancements, others feared their rapid expansion and their tendency to disrupt the status quo. For years, whispers had circled about humanity's role in the future of the galaxy. And now, the Galactic Council, the governing body that controlled much of the galaxy's order, had called humanity forward. The holographic screen before him flickered to life, and the voice of the council's leader echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Reyes, the voice began, cold and neutral. You represent humanity, a species known for its unpredictable nature. We have invited you here to demand one thing. The galaxy has been at peace for millennia, and yet your kind has disrupted that peace. You are expanding your territory, your influence, and your military might at a rate that endangers the stability of the entire galactic community. The Council has unanimously agreed that humanity must cease all military expansion immediately. You will submit to our authority and adopt the peaceful way of life that the rest of us have chosen. Reyes didn't flinch. He stood tall, a faint smirk on his lips. He knew what was coming. This wasn't just a demand, it was a warning. The Council feared humanity's rise. They feared the unpredictability of a species that had no interest in peace for peace's sake, but instead sought to change the galaxy. And that was something the galaxy wasn't ready for. The members of the Council shifted in their seats, their eyes fixed on Reyes. Some were visibly anxious, others passive, but none spoke. Reyes could sense the weight of the moment. Every word he spoke from here on out would be analyzed, dissected. He had only one chance to respond, and humanity's future would hinge on how he chose to handle it. I understand your concerns, Reyes finally spoke, his voice smooth but firm. He paused, surveying the room, making sure every member could hear his words. But you misunderstand us. Humanity isn't here to destroy or dominate. We never have been. You fear us because we are unlike you, because we don't fit into your idea of what a galactic power should be. But what you fail to understand is that we've been shaping our future for centuries. You can demand peace, but peace isn't what we seek. We seek something much greater. The room grew still. The silence was thick, and for a moment, it felt like the entire galaxy was holding its breath. Reyes took a deep breath, his eyes sweeping across the faces before him. We haven't even started. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Some murmured among themselves, clearly unsettled by the calm defiance in Reyes' voice. The leader of the council narrowed his eyes, clearly displeased by the response. Are you defying us, Ambassador? The leader asked, his voice cold. Reyes didn't hesitate. No, but humanity doesn't bend to threats. We never have. We fought for every inch we've gained, not just in this galaxy, but on our homeworld. We fought for our freedom, and we will never stop fighting for it. We will not bow to a council that asks us to shrink our vision. A murmur swept through the room. Reyes could feel the weight of those words settling like a stone in the atmosphere. He wasn't just speaking for himself. He was speaking for humanity as a whole, for every person, every family, every pioneer back on Earth who had worked tirelessly to bring them to this moment. They had earned their place, and they weren't going to give it up quietly. The leader of the council leaned forward, his alien eyes narrowing. "You misunderstand, Ambassador. We do not seek to crush you. We seek to guide you, to help you avoid a path that will lead to your destruction." Rise met his gaze without flinching. "Then maybe it's time the galaxy learned something new." And with that, the stage was set. The council had thrown down the gauntlet, and humanity had answered, not with fear, but with the unwavering confidence that had carried them this far. The galaxy had yet to understand just how much humanity was capable of, and Rise intended to show them, one step at a time. The council members, some ancient beyond measure, others new to the galaxy's politics, had no idea what they were dealing with. They had underestimated humanity's roots, its history, its journey. Ambassador Reyes could feel the weight of it all in the quiet tension of the room. Humanity's rise had been swift, yes, but it hadn't been easy. It was a legend forged in blood, in sacrifice, and above all, in the indomitable will of a species that refused to surrender. Flashbacks filled his mind, transporting him back to humanity's turbulent past. He had read about it, studied it, and perhaps more than anyone, felt it. There were the wars, of course, the bloody wars that almost wiped out Earth. Thousands of years ago, humanity had nearly torn itself apart in a devastating conflict known as the Great Strife. An endless battle for resources and control had nearly extinguished all hope of survival. But out of the chaos, a single truth had emerged. Humanity could not afford to perish. And so, the surviving nations formed an unstoppable unity. The world's old boundaries collapsed, replaced by a single goal: survival. It wasn't just the power of weapons or fleets that had kept humanity alive. No, it was adaptability. The ability to rebuild, to learn, and to grow stronger with every blow. The first great victory came not from war, but from technology. The discovery of fusion power sparked a revolution. The second came when humanity finally cracked the code of space travel and journeyed beyond their world to the stars. But it didn't stop there. Humanity's real strength wasn't their power to destroy, but their relentless ability to build, to innovate, to protect. While the galaxy's older species had long relied on their stagnation and age-old empires, humanity was a newborn fire, ever-changing, ever-growing. In the early days of space exploration, humanity's role had been one of the underdog. Their first few missions were met with skepticism, even ridicule. But soon, they became known for one thing: resilience. They had failed, again and again, but each failure had only made them more determined. Their shipyards, once rudimentary, now churned out state-of-the-art ships. Their science, once basic, now pushed the boundaries of known physics. The first real test came when humanity encountered the Karnak Empire, a ruthless, expansionist force that ruled over a dozen systems. The Karnak's fleet was vast, their technology far more advanced than humanity's early ships. Many expected humanity to bow to their will, to cower before their superior might. But humanity didn't. Instead, it fought back. Not with brute force, but with strategy, innovation, and sheer courage. The Karnak Empire, with all its advanced technology, was outmaneuvered, outsmarted by the human spirit. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and it cost them. This moment in history became the first legend of humanity's rise. Soon after, they faced the Vreth Coalition, a species of psionic beings who believed their mental powers gave them the right to control other civilizations. Humanity didn't bow before their mental prowess. Instead, they found a way to counteract the Vreth's psionic abilities, relying on technology, sheer human ingenuity, and teamwork. Each victory, each conflict, solidified humanity's reputation. They weren't the strongest, but they were unpredictable, impossible to control. As their reach grew, so did their influence. They didn't seek domination. What they wanted was something the galaxy had long forgotten: freedom. Their exploration wasn't driven by the desire for empire, but by the need to understand, to explore, to connect. Wherever humanity's ships landed, they didn't claim planets by force. They forged alliances, traded, and shared knowledge. They helped the weak build strength and stood against the tyrants who would enslave the defenseless. Slowly, humanity became known not just as warriors, but as guardians. By the time the Galactic Council had begun to notice humanity's rise, they were already too late. The human spirit, the thing that could never be measured by fleets or weapons, had already carved its place in the stars. The galaxy, for all its complexity, had one truth that could no longer be denied. Humanity was changing everything. Raya's mind snapped back to the present. He could feel the heat of the stares from across the room, could hear the murmurs of disbelief. The council didn't understand yet. They didn't see the truth of what humanity had become. But soon, they would. The old ways were dying. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a movement. The chamber fell silent after Raya's bold words. The council members, once confident and assertive, now exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions a mix of disbelief and apprehension. The leader of the council, an ancient being with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed with a faint internal fire, leaned forward, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Ambassador Reyes," the leader began, his tone calm but firm, "we understand that humanity has its own path to walk, but the stability of the galaxy is at stake. Your kind is expanding at an unprecedented rate. We are not simply asking for you to cease your militaristic ventures, but to understand that your actions threaten the peace we have maintained for millennia." Reyes met the leader's gaze with unwavering confidence. He didn't flinch, didn't waver. He'd heard this speech before. The fear of change, the condemnation of humanity's ambition. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't a plea for peace, it was a demand for submission. The leader continued, his voice growing more insistent. "We are prepared to offer you everything. Technology, resources, even autonomy over your own territories, on one condition: that you agree to end your expansion and halt any further military conflict. We will provide you with everything you need to thrive, but you must abide by the Galactic Order. You will align yourself with the rest of the galaxy, or face the consequences of your defiance." A tense silence stretched across the chamber. Reyes could feel the weight of their words, the pressure building. The offer was tempting, certainly. The resources alone would transform Earth and its colonies in ways that were unimaginable. Advanced medical technologies, energy sources that could power entire systems, the knowledge to leap ahead by centuries in just a few years. The temptation to accept was real, but there was a problem. It wasn't what humanity stood for. Reyes took a slow breath before speaking, his voice measured but resolute. "Your offer is generous," he began, his words deliberate. "But humanity doesn't want your technology because we can't make our own. We don't need your resources because we have more than enough of our own. What you fail to see is that we're not asking for permission to exist in this galaxy. We've already made our place. We've built it with sweat, with blood, and with an unwavering belief that we deserve to be here." The room shifted uncomfortably as Reyes' words reverberated off the high metallic walls. The alien council members, who had prided themselves on their centuries of peaceful coexistence, now looked uncertain. They had come to the table believing they could control humanity with promises and threats. Instead, they were staring into the eyes of a species that had never needed anyone's approval. Reyes continued, "You say you want peace, but that peace comes at a cost that we're not willing to pay. Humanity doesn't seek to conquer or enslave, but we will not bow to your idea of peace, which is nothing more than submission in disguise." A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. The leader of the council's eyes narrowed, his expression darkening. "This is not a threat, Ambassador. We are offering you a future, one where you will thrive in harmony with the galaxy. To reject this is to invite destruction, not just for you, but for those who stand with you." Reyes held his ground. He could feel the intensity rising. There was a moment of silence before he spoke again, his voice quiet but filled with a quiet power. "We don't need your permission to survive. We don't need your approval to exist in this galaxy. What you're asking is not peace. It's control. And we won't accept it." The council was silent for a long moment. Every eye was fixed on Reyes, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a charged storm. The leader of the council's gaze hardened, but he knew there was little more he could say. The offer had been made, and humanity had rejected it. "Very well," the leader said finally, his voice cold and final. "But know this, we will not allow your kind to continue unchecked. You will face the consequences of your defiance." Reyes gave a small, polite nod. "We're prepared for whatever comes next." The tension in the room was palpable as the meeting drew to a close. The members of the Galactic Council filed out, their thoughts swirling. They had expected humanity to be a threat, perhaps even a nuisance. What they hadn't expected was a species with the audacity to refuse their help and to stand by its own convictions, no matter the cost. Reyes stood alone in the chamber, a sense of quiet determination settling over him. The council had shown their hand, and humanity had answered. The real battle had only just begun. Back on Earth, in the heart of the United Earth Government's Capitol building, a meeting unlike any other was taking place. The President of Earth, Catherine Avery, sat at the head of a long, circular table, flanked by her closest advisors and military leaders. The tension in the room was palpable as Reyes stood before them, his message from the Galactic Council still ringing in his ears. The holographic display before them showed the cold, unwavering faces of the Galactic Council members. They had made their demands clear: halt humanity's expansion and submit to the established galactic peace. But to Catherine Avery, it wasn't just an offer, it was a warning. Humanity wasn't being invited to join the galaxy. It was being told to step aside. The room was divided, with some arguing that the offer should be accepted. After all, the Council's technological gifts were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Medical advancements that could eradicate diseases, energy sources capable of fueling entire cities, and weapons that could protect humanity from any future threat. There were many who saw this as an opportunity to secure humanity's place in the galaxy, to avoid the bloodshed of war and focus on prosperity. But Catherine wasn't one of them. She had seen humanity's history. She had seen how they had fought for every inch of ground, how they had never bowed to anyone, not even when the odds were stacked against them. There was a fire in humanity that the Council could never understand. She stood, silencing the room with a single gesture. Her voice was steady but firm. "I've heard the arguments, and I've read the reports. The Council offers us peace, but that peace comes with chains. We would accept their technology, their resources, but at the cost of our very identity. We would be forced to live under their terms, to obey their laws, to become nothing more than another cog in their machine." A murmur of dissent spread across the room. Some had hoped for diplomacy, others for a quick resolution. But Catherine's words struck a chord, and the weight of what was being asked began to sink in. "Humanity has never been about simply surviving," she continued. "We fought for more than that. We fought for the right to choose, to shape our own future. And if we accept their offer, we lose that freedom forever." A young military officer, General Jared Brooks, stood up, his voice eager and filled with conviction. "President Avery, we cannot afford to fight the entire galaxy. The Council will retaliate. We need their technology. We need their alliances." Avery's gaze was steady, her eyes filled with a quiet power that could not be denied. "We don't need their technology to survive. We never have. We've built everything with our own hands. Our military, our fleets, our colonies. Everything we have, we earned through our own efforts. And that is what makes us stronger than any species they've ever faced." The room grew quiet as her words settled in. The advisors exchanged glances, some uncertain, others resolute. Catherine's voice grew softer, yet no less powerful. Humanity isn't here to be told what to do. We are not here to follow anyone's peace, especially when it means surrendering everything that makes us who we are. A pause. The decision was clear now. Humanity's true answer had been given, not just by the president, but by every individual who had fought, bled, and built this world. They were not going to bow. Not to the council, not to anyone. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Catherine turned to Reyes, who stood at the back of the room, waiting for their decision. His expression was unreadable, but he could see the weight in her eyes, the determination that burned just beneath the surface. "Make it clear to them," Avery said. "Humanity will never bow to threats. We will not be controlled. Let them know that we are ready for whatever comes next." Reyes nodded, his lips curling into a slight, knowing smile. He had known this would be the answer. It had to be. Earth had always been the heart of humanity's spirit, and that spirit would not be extinguished. As the meeting concluded, the room was filled with a quiet resolve. The decision had been made. Humanity would not shrink back. They would not accept the Council's peace on their terms. They would fight for their place in the galaxy. The decision had been made. Now, the galaxy would know humanity's answer. Days passed in the wake of Earth's refusal, and the tension in the void of space grew thicker. Behind the scenes, humanity's leaders worked tirelessly to prepare for what they knew was inevitable. Conflict. They had made their stand, and now they had to back it up. The United Earth military began mobilizing at full speed. The fleets, once designed for defense, were reconfigured for the coming war. Admiral Felix Ward, one of Earth's most experienced commanders, stood at the helm of the U.S. Vanguard, one of the most powerful ships ever constructed. The Vanguard was a symbol of humanity's strength, a colossal warship with weapons capable of turning the tide of any battle. Ward stood before the large viewport of the ship, staring out into the vast expanse of space. Earth's colonies were already on high alert. The Council, having learned of humanity's decision, was preparing for retaliation, but they weren't prepared for the response they were about to receive. Reyes, having relayed the message from Earth's leaders, was on his way back to the capital, but he knew the strike would come soon. He could feel the weight of what was happening. No one expected humanity to move so swiftly, but Earth wasn't about to sit back and wait for an enemy that outnumbered them. Back on Earth, President Avery sat in her war room, surrounded by her top generals and advisors. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "We will not wait for them to make the first move," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "We're going to show them exactly what happens when you push humanity to the brink." The first strike came faster than anyone expected. A small fleet of Karnak warships entered Earth's outer system, no doubt sent as a show of force from the Galactic Council. The Karnak, known for their ruthless nature and enormous fleet, had been one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. They had been the first to encounter humanity's resilience all those years ago, but even they could not have predicted the response they received. Admiral Ward watched the sensor readouts as the Karnak ships entered the system. They were far too close for comfort. Earth's defenses were strong, but a direct engagement with the Karnak fleet would be costly. The Admiral's hand hovered over the command interface as he issued his orders. "Prepare all weapons. Shields up. We're going to make a statement." The Vanguard's weapons powered up with a low, resonating hum. The ship's ion cannons, capable of firing concentrated bursts of energy that could pierce even the toughest hulls, locked onto the incoming fleet. The rest of Earth's military fleet, a coalition of warships and defense platforms from Earth's colonies, had already begun to position themselves. As the Karnak fleet approached, the Vanguard opened fire first, its ion cannons discharging in a blinding flash. The blast struck the lid ship, instantly shredding its outer hull and sending debris spinning into the void. The remaining Karnak ships scattered, returning fire with devastating energy blasts. But they were unprepared for the speed and precision of humanity's counterattack. The Vanguard's shields held steady, absorbing the incoming fire, while its weapons continued to pound the enemy. Within moments, 2 more Karnak ships were destroyed, and the remaining ships began retreating, clearly outclassed. The battle had been swift, decisive, and brutal. Admiral Ward's voice rang out through the ship's intercom. "We are sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity will not be intimidated." The remnants of the Karnak fleet quickly retreated, their ships damaged and their morale shattered. But this was just the beginning. The Galactic Council would not sit idle after such an open act of defiance. They would come for humanity, but Earth had already shown it would not go down without a fight. President Avery, watching the battle unfold from Earth's capital, allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The message had been sent loud and clear. Humanity wasn't afraid to fight for its survival. They would not submit to the will of the Galactic Council. Not now, not ever. "Prepare for the next phase," Avery instructed her generals. "The Council will retaliate, but this time, we'll be ready." As the Vanguard's victory was broadcast across the colonies, a sense of unity surged throughout humanity. The message had been received. The first strike had been made. And with it, humanity's defiance was solidified. The war for the galaxy had begun. The aftermath of humanity's first strike rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Karnak Empire, humiliated by their swift defeat, sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council, demanding retribution. The Council, in turn, convened immediately, their discussions heated and filled with tension. Ambassador Rice watched from Earth's command center as the latest developments unfolded. The Galactic Council had been reluctant to act initially, hoping that humanity would back down after the strike. But as more reports came in of Earth's expanding influence and the loss of the Karnak fleet, the galaxy's balance of power began to tilt. The Council could no longer afford to ignore humanity. In the Council's chamber, the same ancient beings who had once viewed humanity as little more than a nuisance now saw a potential threat to their long-standing peace. The leader of the Council, an ancient species known as the Zilari, rose from his seat, his voice cutting through the murmurs of his colleagues. "We cannot allow this defiance to stand," the Zilari leader declared, his tone filled with authority. "Humanity's actions have crossed a line. If they are left unchecked, they will upset the entire galactic order. We must strike now, before they gain more power." The room erupted into heated debate, each member offering different perspectives. Some, like the Vreth, pushed for direct military retaliation. Others, like the more diplomatic Ryle, proposed sanctions and negotiation. But all agreed that something had to be done. The decision was made. The Galactic Council would send a fleet to Earth, a fleet large enough to crush any resistance, to make an example of humanity. The Zilari were certain that with their overwhelming strength, Earth would be forced to bend the knee. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Catherine Avery stood at the head of a large strategy table, her mind racing with the intelligence reports coming in. The Council had not yet acted, but their plans were clear. She had already prepared for this moment, knowing it was only a matter of time before they would come for her people. "We have a window," she said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We need to strike before the Council can assemble their fleet. If we wait for them to come to us, we're playing into their hands." Her military leaders nodded in agreement. The UEN fleet, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, was already mobilizing. Earth had prepared for the worst, but Catherine wasn't willing to wait to be attacked first. It was time to make their next move. Admiral Felix Ward, having recovered from the recent battle, now prepared for a new challenge. The UEN Vanguard was once again the spearhead, and Ward had a simple mission: strike first, strike fast, and make them realize that humanity wouldn't back down. The Vanguard, along with several other warships, entered hyperspace. Their target, the heart of the Council's forces, a central fleet that had been assembled in the distant Galvath system. The fleet was still in the process of gathering, and they were vulnerable. The Council, confident in their strength, had underestimated humanity's speed and resolve. As the Vanguard exited hyperspace, the sight before them was almost surreal. The Council's fleet, though massive, was spread out across several systems, not yet united in full force. Admiral Ward's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the opportunity before them. If they could cripple the fleet now, before it was fully assembled, humanity would have a fighting chance. "We're going in," Ward ordered. "No turning back now." The fleet engaged, and chaos erupted in space. Humanity's ships, though smaller than the Council's, moved with unmatched precision, using their superior tactics and adaptability to their advantage. The Vanguard unleashed devastating ion blasts, targeting key vessels in the Council's fleet, disrupting their formation. The battle raged on for hours. Despite being outnumbered, humanity's strategy proved more than effective. Earth's ships moved like a well-oiled machine, exploiting every opening and leaving the larger, less coordinated Council ships struggling to respond. Admiral Ward watched as the Council fleet faltered under the relentless pressure. "We've got them on the ropes," he muttered. The flagship of the Council fleet, a massive Zilari warship, was beginning to buckle under the barrage of fire. But the battle was not yet won. The remaining ships began to regroup, forming a last-ditch defense. It was clear that the Council wouldn't stop until humanity was crushed. But the cost of this victory would not be small. Back on Earth, President Avery watched the battle unfold, her eyes hard as stone. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. "We've made our statement. But now the galaxy will truly understand what it means to face humanity." The fight for the galaxy was far from over, and the flames of war had been lit. As humanity pressed on, the stakes grew higher. The Galactic Council had underestimated them. And now, they would face the full weight of humanity's defiance. The war had begun in earnest, and the galaxy was quickly becoming a battleground. The decisive strike by humanity's forces against the Galactic Council's fleet had sent shockwaves through the stars. The Council, once unchallenged in its authority, now found itself struggling to contain a rapidly escalating conflict with a species they had underestimated. Back on Earth, President Catherine Avery stood before the massive holographic map of the galaxy, her eyes scanning the swirling colors of various star systems. The map was covered with red alerts, showing the locations of key battles and military movements. Earth's forces had achieved several tactical victories, but the price was high. The Council's retaliation was coming, and it was going to be far worse than anyone had anticipated. "They're assembling a full-scale invasion force," Admiral Ward reported, his voice tense. "We've detected multiple fleets in the Outer Rim, all converging on Earth's position. This won't be a small skirmish anymore." Catherine nodded grimly. The intelligence was clear. The Galactic Council was preparing for an all-out assault. Every ship, every fleet, was being mobilized to crush humanity once and for all. The Council had already underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were planning to overwhelm Earth with sheer numbers and firepower. "We've known this day would come," she said, her voice filled with cold determination. "We can't afford to wait for them to strike first. We need to take the fight to them." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. Humanity's military, though capable, was still vastly outnumbered. The Council's forces were more advanced, their fleets larger and better equipped. But Catherine knew that Earth's greatest strength wasn't just in technology or numbers. It was in their ingenuity, their sheer will to survive. As the Council's invasion fleets drew closer, Earth's forces were already on the move. The UN Vanguard, along with dozens of other ships, was headed straight for the heart of the Council's armada. Their mission was simple: to disrupt the invasion before it could even begin. The battle would take place in the Zarath Nebula, a cluster of gas clouds and asteroid fields that provided the perfect cover for a daring attack. It was a risk, but the element of surprise was humanity's best weapon. The Vanguard, along with a dozen other ships, entered the nebula with stealth systems engaged, hoping to catch the Council off guard. The Council, confident in their numerical superiority, didn't expect humanity to strike in such a way. As the Vanguard and its fleet emerged from the nebula, They unleashed a devastating barrage of firepower, targeting the unprepared Council ships with surgical precision. The first wave of the attack was overwhelming, sending several smaller Council ships to their doom before they could even respond. But the battle was far from over. The Council quickly regrouped, their larger warships coming to the fore as they retaliated with brutal force. Energy blasts illuminated the dark void of space, the air crackling with the sounds of weapons fire. Humanity's ships fought tooth and nail, using every trick in the book to outmaneuver the superior forces. Admiral Ward, standing at the command center of the vanguard, barked orders as the battle raged on. Focus fire on their flagship. We need to take down their command center. The vanguard's weapons unleashed a powerful salvo at the Zilari flagship, the massive warship at the center of the Council's fleet. The ship's shields flared and faltered under the barrage, but it didn't go down easily. The flagship returned fire, sending a massive energy blast straight into the vanguard side. The ship's hull groaned under the impact, but the crew held steady. "We've got damage on the port side. Shields at 50%, one of the officers shouted. Admiral Ward clenched his fists, watching as his ship took hit after hit. The odds were mounting, but they couldn't stop now. "Keep pushing. We're not backing down." The battle waged on for hours, both sides taking heavy losses. Humanity's ships, though smaller and less advanced, fought with unmatched ferocity. They refused to yield, even as the Council's forces pressed in. The Zilari flagship, now heavily damaged, tried to retreat, but humanity wasn't about to let them go. In a final, desperate push, the Vanguard launched a series of torpedoes that struck the flagship's engines, causing a massive explosion. The flagship disintegrated in a blinding flash, taking a significant portion of the fleet with it. The tide had turned. The Council's forces, though still numerous, had suffered a crippling blow. Humanity had proven that they could strike back even against the odds. But the victory came at a heavy cost. The battle had left humanity's fleet battered, their ships scared and damaged. The Council wouldn't let this setback slide. Back on Earth, Catherine Avery watched the battle unfold from the command center. She knew that the Council would be furious, but she also knew that humanity had reached a tipping point. The fight was no longer just about survival. It was about the future of humanity itself. "We've shown them what we're capable of," Catherine said quietly. "Now we finish what we started." The war was far from over, and the galaxy was on the brink of total chaos. Humanity had made its mark, and the stakes had never been higher. The stars above Earth burned brighter than ever as the full scope of the war unfolded. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity, and now they faced the consequences. The tides of battle had shifted, but the Council wasn't going to let humanity's defiance go unpunished. The stakes were higher than ever, and the final confrontation was on the horizon. The battle-scarred fleet of Earth had regrouped, its ships battered but unbowed. Admiral Felix Ward stood on the bridge of the U.S. Vanguard, his gaze fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The map of the galaxy was scattered with flashes of red, marking the countless skirmishes and battles that had occurred in the last few weeks. Humanity had delivered blow after blow to the Council, but the Galactic Council was not a force to be dismissed easily. "They're coming," Ward muttered to himself as the incoming intelligence reports confirmed it. The Council's final assault was underway. The Zilari, having consolidated their forces, had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. Their warships outnumbered humanity's by a wide margin, and the force bearing down on Earth was massive. But humanity was not afraid. They had already shown the galaxy that they were capable of fighting, of standing up to the most powerful forces in existence. "Prepare for the final engagement," Ward ordered. "We're going to give them everything we've got." On Earth, President Catherine Avery stood in the war room, her mind focused, her heart set on the mission ahead. The Council's ships were en route, and the window for diplomacy had long closed. There would be no negotiation, no second chances. Humanity's survival depended on this last, decisive stand. "We fight or we die," she said to her advisors, her voice resolute. "But we do it on our terms." The UEN fleet had been reinforced with the latest technology humanity could muster, and every ship was prepared for a battle unlike any other. The human spirit, which had carried them through countless wars and struggles on Earth, now fueled their determination to protect their way of life. As the two fleets neared each other in space, the tension in the air was palpable. The Vanguard and the rest of Earth's fleet were positioned on the front lines, ready to engage. The Zilari fleet, led by their flagship, was a massive array of ships, each one a formidable war machine, but the Council hadn't prepared for humanity's strategic brilliance. The first shots rang out across the void, shattering the silence of space. The battle began with a violent explosion of light as the Vanguard and its fleet unleashed everything they had. Humanity's ships maneuvered with incredible precision, using their agility to dodge the Council's heavy fire while returning devastating blasts. The Zilari flagship, as expected, led the charge, but humanity wasn't content with simply defending their home. "Target their flagship," Admiral Ward commanded. "We take down their leader, we take down their morale." The Vanguard, its weapons fully charged, fired a barrage of energy blasts at the Zilari ship, striking it with pinpoint accuracy. The flagship's shields flickered and failed, allowing the next volley of missiles to pierce its hull. Explosions erupted from within as the flagship was torn apart, its command center decimated. The Council's flagship was lost, and with it, the center of their power. The ripple effect was immediate. The Council's fleet faltered, and for the first time since the war began, there was a noticeable crack in their unity. The Zilari, their morale shattered, began to pull back, but they weren't giving up entirely. They regrouped, launching counterattacks with their remaining ships, but humanity's resolve was stronger than ever. Back on Earth, Catherine Avery watched the battle unfold, her pulse steady despite the chaos. "We've got them on the run," she said, the weight of her words sinking in. This was the turning point. Humanity had proven they could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest powers in the galaxy, and now the Council knew that Earth would never bow. As the battle stretched on, it became clear that the Galactic Council was no longer the unstoppable force they once were. Their retreat was forced, and their remaining warships scattered to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Humanity's victory was all but assured. In the aftermath of the battle, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The ships of the UEN fleet, battered but victorious, returned to Earth, and the citizens of the colonies watched in awe as their champions came home. The war had cost them dearly, countless lives, the loss of ships, and the scars of battle, but they had held their ground. The Council's power had been broken. Humanity had won, but it was more than a victory of arms. It was a victory of spirit. The Galactic Council, once the unquestioned authority in the galaxy, now had to reckon with the fact that humanity would never again be silenced, never again be subjugated. President Avery stood at the front of a crowded assembly, the weight of their success settling on her shoulders. "We've shown the galaxy who we are," she said, her voice steady and proud. "We are humanity. We fight, we survive, and we thrive, and no one will ever take that from us." The future of the galaxy had been forever changed, and humanity had secured its place among the stars.